Hey, what's going on, my people? We are back with another video. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Atlanta Hawks. Obviously, I made a video a couple months ago explaining how they, along with the Denver Nuggets, have won the offseason by getting guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kristaps Porzingis, and Luke Kennard. But I'm going to dive further into this team, and I'm going to give y'all my straight-up analysis on how good I think they will be this year. And they will be really flipping good, man. Obviously, since their last playoff appearance in 2023, these last two seasons have not really been kind to Atlanta. Obviously, we all know the Trae Young, DeJounte Murray experiment did not work out because the hope when they got DeJounte in 2022 is that DeJounte can be a complimentary second star next to Trae. But the problem is, both needed the ball in their hands to succeed. And there were a lot of lineups with both DeJounte and Trae that were mainly net negatives. And obviously after the 2024 campaign where they got booted out in the play-in tournament by the Chicago Bulls, DeJounte ended up moving to New Orleans and Trae Young had a not so great roster to work with, even though he had Jalen Johnson who was having a breakout year in the 2024-25 season, averaging 18.9 with 10 rebounds and 5 assists. But unfortunately, he had to miss the rest of the 2024-25 campaign because of an injury on his shoulder. And in 2024, they had the number 1 overall pick, to which they drafted Zach Risache, who was a French prospect. Not many people knew who he was at the time, but he wasn't great at all in the first half of the year. But since the All-Star break last season, he averaged 16.4 a game with 4 rebounds, shooting 53% and almost 40% from 3. And Big O Onyeka Okongwu was having a breakout year himself, averaging 13 and 9 rebounds a game, almost a double-double. And his three-point shot has improved every single year too, which is pretty cool to see. And because of the fact the Hawks are very high on Zach Risache, as well as the play of Jalen Johnson, even though he was hurt, it made guys like DeAndre Hunter expendable, and it made guys like Bogey Bogdanovic expendable. They traded Bogey to the Clippers for Terrence Mann, and then they traded DeAndre Hunter to the Cavaliers for George Niang and Karis LeVert. Now, I say all these positive things about the Hawks and their players. Obviously, Trae is a beast. Zach Risache is only getting better, and Jalen Johnson's only getting better, and then Big O in them. But unfortunately, the Hawks were a very mid team. They were the number 8 seed in the East. Not bad, but unfortunately they had a 40-42 record. And a lot of the games that I did watch, the Hawks looked really overmatched, even if Trae had a really good game. And because of the fact that they were not a great team, they got their butts handed to them by not only the Orlando Magic, they lost the game 120-95 in Orlando. Trae struggled in that game. Trae bounced back in the play-in game in Atlanta versus Miami, had 29 points and 11 assists, shooting a really decent percentage, but unfortunately that wasn't enough as they would go on to lose in overtime to the 10 seed Miami Heat. And even with Trae Young averaging a career high in assists this year, he averaged almost 12 assists, which is actually pretty good, along with his 24 points a game. The last two seasons were failures for Atlanta, and then you obviously take into account 2021-22, where they got bounced by the Jimmy Butler-led Heat in 5 games, and then 2023, where they did force a Game 6 while they were down 3-1, but it wasn't enough because the Celtics would go on to win that series anyway. The future of the Atlanta Hawks was in peril, and Trae's future in Atlanta was in peril. Apparently, there were reports that Trae did not sign an extension, and I think he's going to use this year as a contract year. Things were looking really dire for Atlanta. But the front office absolutely cooked this offseason. Now, I'm going to piggyback on some of my points that I made in my Nuggets-Hawks video on why I think they won the offseason. And I think these signings are going to make the Hawks 10 times better than what they were the last couple seasons. To start off their offseason, the Atlanta Hawks got Kristaps Porzingis from the Celtics. I obviously talked about this trade many times. They ended up trading George Niang and I think a second-round pick. And they added on to what is an impressive offseason by getting Nickeil Alexander-Walker from the Minnesota Timberwolves via free agency, and then they ended up adding Luke Kennard as well. Nickeil Alexander showed that he is one of the better defenders in the NBA, and obviously on the Wolves, he was arguably their second, third best defender next to Jaden McDaniels and Ant Edwards, and obviously Rudy Gobert manning the paint. Now, Nickeil Alexander's defense with Ant, with Jaden, with Rudy, and obviously this past season, Dante DiVincenzo, was one of the reasons why the Minnesota Timberwolves were such a gritty defensive team in the postseason, especially if you look at 2024. Obviously, this was before they got Dante from New York, and they still had Karl Anthony Towns on the team. You saw Nickeil Alexander, along with Ant and Jaden, defend guys like Devin Booker, KD, Bradley Beal, Jamal Murray, KCP. Obviously, they couldn't stop Luka and Kyrie, but you obviously saw what they did with Dante this past postseason. defending guys like Luka and LeBron and Austin Reeves, along with Jimmy Butler and Draymond and I guess Brandon Podziemski because Steph wasn't playing at all in that series. But unfortunately for them, they couldn't stop Shai Gilgeous and that thunderous Thunder team. Obviously, there's a different type of dynamic in Atlanta because Ant Edwards is 6'5", and I think he's like, 220, 230, somewhere along those lines. And then going to Atlanta, where the best player on that team is Trae Young, who's 6'1" and like 165 or something like that. And Trae's not a great defender either, but he's one hell of a passer and one hell of an offensive player all around. But I think with guys like Jalen Johnson, UHHH, Dyson Daniels, who I forgot to mention, Dyson Daniels is a freaking beast, and he's a really, really good defender as well. And then you have Big O and then Porzingis, who I will get to after I'm done talking about Nickeil Alexander. I do trust that Quinn Snyder will put Nickeil in the right positions the same way Chris Finch was able to put Nickeil Alexander in the right positions when he was in Minnesota. And most importantly, Nickeil Alexander can space the floor, and he can put the ball on the floor too. So if there's no Trae Young because he's either injured or he's in foul trouble, Nickeil Alexander will be a primary ball handler for the second unit, or he can take pressure off of Trae just like he did with guys like Ant and Mike Conley. Now let's talk about Kristaps Porzingis. Obviously, they ain't called Bro the Unicorn for no reason at all. Obviously, this past postseason, Porzingis wasn't great, especially in the second round against his old team, the New York Knicks. Porzingis was battling an illness, which kind of limited him, and it kind of screwed up his game a little bit, and obviously it was very evident if y'all watched those games. Porzingis was clearly not himself. I get that Porzingis is one of those players where you put if healthy, he can do this, that, and the other. But y'all gotta understand though, Porzingis, when he was healthy, he was a major contributor to why the Celtics won the championship in 2024. Obviously, it helps that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are the main stars, and then you have defensive-minded dogs in Derek White and Drew Holiday. Porzingis, if y'all look at that game 1 in the finals, he had 20 points with 3 blocks and 6 rebounds. Obviously, we saw the effects of a healthy Porzingis on the floor. He was obviously the biggest difference, well, I wouldn't say the biggest difference maker, but he was a main contributor and a main difference maker to the Celtics winning that championship in 2024. And let me tell y'all something, man. Them Trae, Kristaps, pick and pops are going to go freaking crazy because Trae can shoot half-court shots, and Porzingis with that big frame can shoot half-court shots as well. But no, seriously, he can also roll to the rim. He can score in the high post and even in the low post as well. And on defense, he doesn't have to be the best defender, but he's a very solid rim protector, especially if you have guys that can defend around him. Just like with Boston, Atlanta has guys that can defend around Porzingis, but obviously those guys are there to shield Trae on defense. Dyson Daniels, Zach UHHH, Jalen Johnson, Nickeil Alexander, and then you have Porzingis. And obviously if Porzingis does get hurt, you have a guy like Onyeka Okongwu to fill in that role as well. So you have that, and lastly, I want to talk about Luke Kennard. I saw a lot of Clipper games when Luke was on the team, and I said this in my offseason video talking about the Hawks. If Luke can do what he can do next to guys like Reggie Jackson, Marcus Morris, and obviously Kawhi Leonard and Paul George in that playoff run in 2021, I'm very confident that he can do those same things next to guys like Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. And obviously, we were able to see some of Luke in Memphis as well, even though that was short-lived because they were first-round exits every time. But with a guy like Trae, who is 100 times the playmaker that Ja Morant, Reggie, Marcus Morris, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Desmond Bane are, I think Luke will get a lot more quality looks than he had with Memphis and the Clippers. Other auxiliary players include Mohamed Gay, who is a forward, nice defender, pretty good rebounder at his size, but I haven't watched too much of him this past season. Good energy guy to get off your bench. To reiterate what I said in my last offseason video, talking about the Atlanta Hawks in particular, the thing that I loved that Atlanta did this offseason was they added length around Trae. In a league where short guards are usually the ones that are hunted on defense, i.e. Jalen Brunson of the Knicks and Steph Curry before he put on all that muscle in those early upcoming days with the Warriors. And yeah, you can even throw in names like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell or CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard in their Blazer days. You need guys with length and versatility on defense to protect the main offensive player if the main offensive player is under 6'3". And it's very very important to have length and switchability because, number one, it protects the offensive player from getting hunted on defense, and number two, it allows the coach to run complex defensive schemes and confuse the offensive player, and they can force them into ISOs as well and prevent open threes. And number three, it conserves that star player's energy, especially when it comes to the fourth quarter when he's going to get the ball and score. The Knicks were pretty successful at it this past season because of the fact that they added OG Anunoby in 2023-24, and then Mikal Bridges later on, and then the increased play of guys like Miles McBride and Landry Shamet as well also helped out. And then you have Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns. And now with Atlanta, there's a lot of length around TRAE. Obviously, with guys like Jalen Johnson, Zach Ricochet, and the addition of Kristaps Porzingis helps a lot. They have length coming off their bench, especially with guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker coming into the mix. Now, as far as my overall outlook for Atlanta goes, I expect them to be a much better team this year. In fact, I would say they would be a number 3 or 4 seed in a weak Eastern Conference. I've said this multiple times when talking about Eastern Conference teams. The injuries to Tyrese Halliburton in the Game 7 of the Finals, and then Jason Tatum in that Game 4 in New York City. Both of them are Achilles tears and all that other stuff. When you have those things going on, the East is wide open. Obviously, the favorites to come out the East are the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks, considering the seasons they had last year, and everyone expects them to build off that now because of the aforementioned injuries. But I would definitely fear facing this Atlanta Hawk team, especially in the playoffs, because playoff TRAE, he's a bad man. TRAE's a bad man as he is. But playoff TRAE is freaking deadly. Also, it's the fact that he's beaten the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks before. Obviously, different dynamics and different teams back then. The Knicks didn't have Jalen Brunson at the time, and the Cavaliers didn't have Donovan Mitchell. But TRAE has beaten those teams before with arguably worse Atlanta Hawk teams. And now, not only you added length around TRAE, but you added a champion in Porzingis. And because of that, teams are not going to easily hunt TRAE like they used to because they have so much length to cover ground. And plus, you can throw in Nickeil Alexander-Walker with Dyson Daniels, with Zach Ricochet, and Jalen Johnson, and Porzingis and Okongwu, depending on who's healthier. Even though I would still pick Cleveland and the Knicks to get out of the East, I would not blame anyone for wanting to put their money on TRAE and the Hawks. And I do think this could be the year where they can make it back to the conference finals for the first time in 5 years. Obviously, they had a really good roster then, but they didn't have this good of a roster. Obviously, Lou Will being a small guard off the bench in 2021, it didn't really give TRAE much rest because Lou Will was getting hunted on defense too. And yeah, John Collins is a good player, but I think him and TRAE just didn't pan out in the end. And I think Collins wanted a lot more money and he ended up bouncing to Utah. Now he's with the Clippers. But now they have a legit roster. And if I have to face this Atlanta Hawk team in the playoffs, whew, y'all better watch out, man, because this Atlanta Hawk team can mess around and find themselves in the conference finals and, heck, making the NBA finals. Now, do I think they're champions? Probably not, especially if they have to go up against teams like Denver, teams like Oklahoma City, maybe Minnesota, the Lakers. You get the idea. That's how strong the West is. But I do think the Atlanta Hawks built the perfect roster around TRAE Young. TRAE has much better weapons around him, and I do think this team are not only contenders in the East, but I do think they could have an Indiana Pacer-like run. But what do you guys think? Do you guys believe in Atlanta? Do you guys think TRAE Young is overrated? Do you guys think even with the roster they have now, they might struggle to make the playoffs? And what do you guys think of the signings? Do you like the Porzingis trade? Do you like the signing of Luke Kennard? Do you like the signing of Nickeil Alexander-Walker? Which I'm pretty sure most of y'all will say y'all like the latter. But if you guys would have signed better options, just let me know who they should have signed or who they should still sign in the comments below. We are in the beginning stages of Media Day and preseason starting next week. And then the MLB playoffs. It's an exciting month in October, brother. So I'm going to enjoy this. And I cannot wait for the NBA season to start. Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up, man. But you get the idea. But until my next video, that is the end of this video. I'm X. Deuces. Oh!